تعطيه sheet فينا sheet. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I'm going to speak in English because we've got one person who cannot speak much Arabic. So we go with the least common denominator. Thank you again, really thank you very much for coming. We are conducting this as part of a study that we have been commissioned by the DAI, who are working on the Lebanon Water Project. And we are working on this water security problem that with two sides. One is looking at water quality and the processes that the water establishments and their labs will be involved in analyzing, sampling, analyzing, and working on their projects. And there is the other set, which is the overarching set, which is looking at water security in the various water establishments in the Litani. And we're starting, this first phase for us is with focus on the Beqa' and the Litani. And for this, we have we're looking at the long-term and the short-term and long-term threats and impacts to water resources now for this phase, especially in the Beqa', and with the various dimensions that make up water security. And we would like also, as part of this project, to identify areas where we can improve and enhance the capabilities of the water establishments in terms of their ability to deliver services in a timely, effective, and environment-friendly way, and at the same time to help them improve their resilience to various types of risks that are common to Lebanon and the region, and also with a special focus on risks to their regions. And some of these natural risks we can call on floods, drought, climate change, earthquakes, waterborne diseases, conflicts, various threats that we can come up with. And once we collect this information that we get, we would like then, once we identify this information, then we would like to go on and couple that with different growth projections and climate change projections to help the water establishments really then assess their status in terms of water security, their current status, and then how they build up into the future and how they change, given the different scenarios that we're addressing. And throughout all this, there is this very critical, important part, which is the economic financial component. Thus, our need to look at the cost-benefit of the various approaches, strategies that would improve our water supply and the water security of these areas. And for this, the objective, we asked you here to help us or help guide us go through some of the dimensions that we have come up with as defining what water security is. And I will get to that in a little bit. So what we want out of this meeting today is some guidance to help us assess the relevance and the significance of the key dimensions that we have determined to be the composite parts of water security. We would like you also to maybe guide us and help us rank or assign weights to the different dimensions, keeping in mind that we're looking at the local aspect as well. And then we want to assess the significance of the selected indicators that make up your dimensions. For each dimension, there are sets of indicators that describe that dimension or that shape it. And we would like also assistance and guidance in that what you think of the selected indicators that make up the dimensions. And we would like also, while we address these indicators, there are data that give these indicators. And we would like to see how easy it is to understand the selected indicators that we have, how easily accessible the data that provide this. And we want also to see the time intervals that we should be looking at, where they are at, and how to section it. And as well, maybe to look at the sources for these data and indicators. And maybe towards the end, maybe if there is enough time, then we will go through and explore composite scores for these indicators. Also, as we go along, sources and types of data that can help us build this picture would be welcome. Before I turn over the mic to the team doing the research, I would like to say that this project is funded by the USAID for us, and we have assembled a good team of researchers that will guide us through. I would start on this side maybe. Yasmin Al-Amin is the project coordinator. She will be following up with everybody that's working on this. Yasmina Shwairi is our water expert. We've got two Yasminas. Not Yasmin, Yasmina, two. We've got Yasmina separate. We've got Abed Hashaheen. Hashhadi, sorry. Sorry, Abed. Abed Hashhadi, he is a geologist and a hydrogeologist, GIS expert, a man with many hats. And Rana Al-Haj, she's the program, the Climate Change and Environment program. We've got Dr. Ali Shala. He's the economist leading the outlook on the cost benefit and other aspects. And assisting him is Jana Murad. She's also working, she's an economist helping us work on this. So this is the team. Yasmina Al-Amin will walk us through the various aspects of the project and then the discussion. So if you bear with us a little bit, we want to give you an overview of the project and the different dimensions and indicators that we have. Thank you. Go on. If you want, yes. If you would like, maybe we can go do a round table to introduce the participants so that everybody knows who's here. Maybe we can start with
Ramzi Ibrahim. I am a project engineer with the Swiss Embassy. We are working on a project with the Kawaki establishment, and our offices are in Saudi.
My name is Lucas Deck. I'm working on the same project. I'm the head of the project.
Mohamed Ghalib, I'm a research assistant at DAI that are managing the USAID-funded project that is part of funding this project.
Nabil Amasha, I'm senior advisor at the Lebanon Water Project. This project.
Bassam Jaber, senior advisor at the AI project and former general director of the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Water.
I am a technical coordinator on the climate change and environment team at Hassan Fez.
What she said. The city. No, I'm working on the water security project along with Rena and Nadeem and Lucas and Ramzi from Abikar.
Yeah, so I'm Ali Shala. I'm an applied economist and associate professor at the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences at the UBS, and I'm the chief economist, if I may say, of the MWP project. Yeah, so looking forward to this exciting endeavor. And
Nader Kabili, student at AUB and an intern at IFI.
Michel Smeha, assistant water officer, representing UNCR. We are also working on a DEFCO project in water project in Bekaa and North. Hadi Jafar, Assistant Professor of Irrigation and Water Management at the Department of Agriculture at AUB.
Jad Baba, currently working at UNDP, but I did my thesis project on policy interventions within the Litani, so it's kind of similar to this project.
Suhail Soul, employee of Dar Al-Handasa.
هو الهيد of the department.
He's the head or co-head of the Resources and Environment Department at Al-Handasa. Dr. Suhail Soul كمان يعني مش
This is one of his many colleagues.
بس تواضع لك.
Okay. So I think I'm going to start. So I'm just going to start by giving everyone just a background about how the concept of water security emerged. And Nadim is going to kill me for this slide, but just bear with me. I'm going to go through it very quickly. So we've had, over the past few years, a very rapid population growth. And by 2050, we're expected to reach 9.3 billion people. At the same time, food demand is rising, and it's going to rise by 60% in the same period. And we currently have agriculture, which accounts for roughly 70% of total water withdrawals, and even 90% in the least developed countries. And we also have the overall industry, which uses about 19% of the world's water withdrawals, So all of these competing uses on water resources, but we still have 1.8 billion people without reliable access to water, and 2.4 billion people without access to improved sanitation facilities. So coupled with this, we've had some other pressures on water resources. We've had increased floods, droughts, and storms, which have had a lot of impacts on populations and a lot of economic impacts. And we've also had severe pollution across all rivers in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And currently, we have almost 80% of the world's population living in areas where we have threats to water security. So I'm going to explain to you now the main definitions we've had for water security throughout our project. So the first one is by Gray and Sadov, and it states that water security is the availability of an acceptable quantity and quality of water for health, livelihood, ecosystems, and production, coupled with an acceptable level of water-related risks to people, environment, and economies. And this is our second definition, which is quite long, but it basically states that water security means that at any level from the household to the global, every person has enough safe water at affordable cost to lead a clean, healthy, and productive life while ensuring that the natural environment is protected. So water security also looks at different aspects of development. It looks at poverty reduction, food security, health, but it also ensures that economic growth is being sustained in different sectors. And it's based on the 3 pillars of sustainability, which are social equity, environmental sustainability, and economic efficiency. So basically, these are the two definitions that we've adopted throughout our study. And now bringing you to the case of Lebanon, which I'm sure that you all know, but just a few facts. So in 2010, it was estimated that the total renewable resources were at 926 meter cube per capita per year, and this number was expected to drop to 839 by 2015, and this was before the Syrian crisis. So we also are now currently facing a lot of threats to water security, which are population growth, rapid urbanization, the Syrian crisis. We are feeling the impact of climate change, and we are also suffering from water mismanagement, either in governance or in pollution, anywhere across the sector. Okay, so I know the map is not very nice, but this is our study area. So for this project, we're going to be looking at the Bekaa region, which is basically under the governance of the Bekaa Water Establishment, and the Upper Litani Basin, which is under the governance of the Litani River Authority. And I'm going to explain to you now the methodology that we've adopted throughout the study. So we came across a lot of methodologies to quantify water security, and they varied a lot according to the scope and the scale of the study. But there was a general consensus that quantifying water security should be done according to key dimensions, which reflect the different challenges across the water sector. So each of these dimensions can reflect agriculture, food production, economy, and each of these dimensions also have indicators. And each of these indicators reflect these dimensions and also reflect improved water security. So we've based our methodology on two main reports, one by the Asian Development Bank and one by the International Water Management Institute. And according to our literature review, we came up with these specific dimensions to Lebanon. And we also did this by looking at the specific economic, socio, and political and environmental conditions in Lebanon. So we have basically 5 dimensions. We have the domestic water security, the environmental water security, the economic. We're going to look at risk management, and we're also going to look at water infrastructure. And I know you see here that we have governance up here, but we're not actually going to assess it as a dimension. We're going to have it as a sort of cross-cutting category, because improved governance is not an outcome of water security, but it still influences it. So we're going to look at it in a separate way and see how it's going to impact water security in Lebanon. So I will be presenting the first 3 dimensions and some of their indicators, and then the other Yasmina will be presenting the other 3 dimensions. Yeah. Okay. So starting with the domestic water security, we've defined this dimension as a dimension which assesses the clean and which assesses the access to water resources on all levels, on the household, on all consumer level, including households and refugees. And basically, we're going to assess to what extent the needs for domestic water and sanitation are being met, and we're going to identify potential needs to improve quantity, quality, and continuity of resources provided. So here are some of the indicators that we've come up with. I think you have them in the sheets that we gave to everyone. So some of them are very basic, so I'm just going to go through them quickly. So we're assessing access to improved sanitation, access to safe drinking water, hours of public water supply per household, renewable water resources, and we're looking at the DALYs, the age standardized disability adjusted life years. So these are a few of our indicators. So we'll come back to them in the discussion. Now moving to the other dimension, the environmental water security. So this dimension is going to be assessing the health of river and water-related ecosystems in the Bekaa and the region governed by the Litani. So in this dimension, we're going to assess the status of water resources in these regions and identify threats to water-related environments in the region. So in this dimension, we sort of developed different indices to assess environmental water security. We first developed a groundwater health index. So in it, we're going to be looking at groundwater quality and groundwater quantity. And we also have a surface water health index. We're going to be looking at river discharge, seasonal flow alteration, water storage capacity, level of water stress. But we're also going to assess surface water quality with all of these sub-indicators mentioned here. And we also have other indicators which might impact water resources, which are percentage of agricultural lands near water bodies, deforestation rates, pressure on freshwater species. So we'll come back to that later too, but just presenting some of them. And we also have the economic water security. So we've defined it as a dimension which assesses the productive use of water resources to sustain economic growth in 3 sectors, the agricultural, industrial, and energy sector. But we're also going to evaluate economic aspects of water supply by regional water establishments. So here are some of the indicators. We have indicators for agriculture, looking at agricultural water productivity, farmers' access to irrigation water. We're also going to assess industrial water productivity. When it comes to energy, we're going to assess or measure hydropower potential. And then we're going to look at the establishment themselves, and we're going to try to look at cost recovery, the percentage of non-revenue water, basically some indicators which assess the financial performance of establishments. So thanks, and yes, me now, number 2.
Okay. So for the risk management dimension, we're defining risk management as the capacity of authorities and the community within the Bekaa water establishment and Litani River authorities region to forecast, plan, adopt, and recover from extreme events, including natural or man-made and anthropogenic, such as droughts, floods, and earthquakes, and waterborne diseases, looking at short-term and long-term impacts. What we mean by risk management basically is the country's exposure to basic vulnerability and coping capacity to hazards, to its water resources, and how this shapes its resilience. And what we mean basically by resilience is the factors that impact the socio-economic and environmental layers, including population density and population growth and the environment. Some of the risk management, the extreme events that we're talking about, the natural ones include risk of floods, risk of droughts and earthquakes. The anthropogenic ones we're talking about is risk of conflict, pollution, and also the general ones including socioeconomic indicators. Some of the indicators that we looked at for the flood is things that relate to deforestation rate, groundwater table, stormwater infrastructure, pervious and impervious spaces. I think you have the full list of indicators with your sheets if you want to go over them. The drought indicators include number of consecutive of dry days, change in rainfall pattern, intensity, snow coverage. The conflict indicator includes things such as the number of recorded incidents, the areas that share the same region, the shared water resource in intra and extra regional. The pollution indicators include the number of water. Should I continue? The pollution indicators, they include things as registered, the areas, the industrial and agricultural areas near water bodies, hospital records of waterborne diseases. We're going to also look at earthquakes such as landslides and erosions. The socioeconomic indicators include elements such as population growth, education enrollment, infant mortality. Going over the water infrastructure dimension, basically what we mean by infrastructure here is the services and the facilities that are necessary to make for a society to function. This includes things such as communication, transportation, energy, and water. However, we're basically looking at the water infrastructure in this study. And what we mean by water infrastructure is basically how and what goes in and outside the city. And here we see how a water system, a very basic diagram showing how a water system functions. And it has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the water source. We have rivers, springs, and reservoir. And then we have the transportation of this water system to a water treatment, which is the second phase. We have the water treatment facilities and their distribution to a city. Once they're consumed and then they become a wastewater, again here we have the wastewater collection, the transportation, conveyance, wastewater treatment facilities, and finally the discharge. Some of the indicators that we're looking at for the water infrastructure are things related to water service disruption, average of time of the water is being distributed, and then the frequency of the water service, the aging of the infrastructure, how old is the infrastructure and if it's being maintained, leakages, their percentages and their amounts, emergency of water supply, whether there's enough water storage capacity and their connections. And finally, the water network coverage, how many households and businesses are connected to the infrastructure. Our final dimension is the governance. The way we're defining governance, governance refers to policies and continuous monitoring of their proper implementation. It also includes mechanisms to balance the power and accountability of governing bodies. However, for the water governance, it also refers to the range of political, socio-economic, and administrative systems that develop and manage water resources, including delivery of services. Yasmina already mentioned that governance is not being defined as a dimension in this study because it's not an end on its own. However, it's an element it's used as a means to improve water security. And then we will assess the capacity of the current governance framework and institutions to ensure improved water security within our study. In Lebanon, before going into that, in Lebanon, Law 221 basically consolidated that the governance of the water resources, they have 4 water establishments and the Litani River Authority. And they're all under the Ministry of Energy and Water. And we're looking basically at the World Bank's World Governance Index as one of the methodologies to identify and measure governance in our study. Some of the indicators that we looked at are sound financial management, such as sufficiency of generated revenue, quality of financial management, water accountability, transparency, meaning who makes the decisions, is there enough information made available to the public, and so on. And finally, the last slide, which is accountability and corruption and tax authority with their sub-indicators.
Okay.
What we have is all of the experts have folded with all the dimensions that we have selected and with the indicators for these. It would be great.
Yeah.
It would be great. What I want to do is to go, if we can, one by one into these dimensions and these indicators, and see how what you think of them and how we can, if the indicators that we have selected are adequate based on your knowledge and expertise, and if the indicators we have data for those, or if we don't. And it would be great if we can start, one by one. I don't know if you would like to open it up for discussion. We can just start with the first indicator, the first dimension, and list the indicators beneath it and see how it works with that. And there is a scoring for each of these indicators that we have, that we rank from 1 to 5. Let's do whatever we can. I mean, we have an hour some left, so we can try to cover as much as we can. We're imposing, I know, but if we can go forward with that. بلش بالindicators. ما نبلش بالindicators بالشيء ولا نحكي عن الشيء. طب بلش بالdimension.
I just have a question about the study area. Are you including also the locals? Because you have this nice list, it's very big. And two, where are the representatives of the VW and the LRA?
We are looking at the jurisdiction under the Beqa Water Establishment. It's in its entirety, and what the Litani River Authority manages and runs. Sorry. In the Beqa, the LRA in the northern Beqa, north of the upstream portion of the Litani, upstream of the dam. Yes, yes. Yes. The upper portion of the river.
The water authority is also in charge of the northern Beqa.
Right.
So is this included?
Yes. Everything that's under BWE jurisdiction, plus the Litani River, the upper portion of the Litani River. That's excluding everything downstream of the dam.
Isn't West Beqa, so
East.
it's not in the Litani Basin, it's in the... It's outside the Litani Basin.
But it is under the jurisdiction of BWE, it should be, but it's not.
Rashaya is not under the BWE. Is it? It is? Okay. Okay. طيب يعني ما بعرف لشوفها وكست على رشاية. Why did you focus on رشاية?
Just looking at the study area. How many basins that you are looking at from this perspective? I'll be coming to why I asked my question. And the representatives of the LRA and the BWE.
Look, what we want, it is not, we want input on the dimensions that we selected, and then the indicators that we want to use. We are soliciting expert opinions on these, and we will have separate stakeholder meetings with them after we come up with this. So we are basically launching our study now. We just launched our study basically now, and we want to move on forward with this. After we solicit your input, we will hold a separate meeting with the LRA and the BWE to see what they think and how we can then move forward with that. So it is a step-by-step process on these.
Basically what we want from you is, I think I have the objectives here. Okay. So basically, of all the identified dimensions, if you could give us a ranking, which ones do you think are more important than the others? And if you think that these dimensions accurately encompass all threats to water security in Lebanon. And then after we do that, we are going to look at different indicators. So I think we have the table where for each dimension, we would go through some indicators, and then you can tell us how relevant you think they are, if they are easily going to be understood by stakeholders, our stakeholders, which are the water establishment and the Litani. And then if it's easy for us to have access to these indicators in terms of data. So if it's easy for us to have data for these indicators. And what else? Okay, this. And then this, if we have time, maybe think of composite scores for indicators, but I know that we don't have much time. So
excuse me, how the dimensions scoring on the sheet?
Yes.
The dimensions.
Dimensions? No, it's going to be on the flip chart. Yeah.
Taking their opinion about the dimensions, and then they can move to the indicator.
What I think is that the whole thing is too optimistic, especially that we're looking into things that, for example, like transparency, financial management, things like that, and with all the other factors that you mentioned. I don't know how long this project is or what the budget is, but I think it's a bit overly optimistic if you're planning to look into all those aspects. For example, non-revenue water, how are you going to look into that? We still don't have any, they don't even know how much water they're producing in the country. So how are we going to look into non-revenue water when we don't even have a water balance?
That's why we need transfers, no?
I mean, that was one of the aims of this meeting, was to try and gauge whether these data are available. So is that possible even to
you're looking to narrow down? Are you looking to narrow down? or-
Partly so, but partly, I mean, we know that there's a big data problem on one hand, but on the other, we're hoping that if these indicators are not available per se, that maybe we can use proxies for them. So do you think there's any way to try and gauge how much water is produced and how much water is lost before it reaches the customers? I mean, that's, if these data are not directly available, maybe we can get something, maybe there's data to be used as proxy for this.
See, I think, with all due respect to the methodology of this, putting scores just, is this like an expert opinion scoring? I mean, how can you score whether groundwater recharge is more important than abstraction?
No, we're not comparing. It's within that indicator. How important do you think this indicator is? How significant or relevant this indicator is? Is it important or not? So the scale is from 1 to 5, and 5 is most important, 1 is least important, and then you score for that particular indicator. And then maybe we can sum then the indicators to give a weight or a score for the dimension. So, and again,
But I still have a question with regard to these scores.
Yes.
I mean, this really depends your point of view.
Correct.
And even it depends the seasonality. I mean, I'm just taking deforestation rate, for instance. It depends, is this important in summer or winter, autumn, spring? It's a difference. So is it important from my own perspective? But you don't, I mean, when I score it, you don't know my perspective. It's a very, for me, it's a very random, arbitrary guess. And what you take from my scoring is even, I think, I don't know how to put the score, to be honest.
If you feel that you cannot score something, no need to score it. But the reason we're gathering different people from different expertise here is to get the different perspectives. And this gives a picture, because we have our own team that will be working on scoring this, and then we will add on to whatever you come up with, the stakeholders' input. So we have a really big picture of where we stand on this. But I understand that there are different perspectives, there are different approaches to this, that you would rather, if you would rather not score something, don't score it, and just, maybe you can say applicable or not, or remove or keep. Because there is a slot for a score, and then there's another slot for a comment. So if you want to just comment rather than score, we will take that into consideration as well.
If I may add, scoring really should be a reflection of how much of a priority dimension is. So if you don't feel comfortable maybe with scoring, the comments could be used as a way of conveying your idea or your perception, how much of a priority this issue is within the dimension of expression, which can then or cannot be converted into a score. That's something we can take further. The main issue behind the scoring is to find out how much of a priority from key experts in the field this should be within the dimension. The other thing, of course, to gauge from this meeting is whether data is available to approximate these dimensions or not. So scoring is really about priority. If you don't feel comfortable putting down a number, then maybe expanding by through your opinion on how much of a priority it is will do the job.
Basically, it's saying if you think that this indicator is good,
Relevant.
is relevant in this specific dimension, the way we explained it, if you think that this indicator is a good enough indicator to measure this dimension of water security.
Martin,
So,
you have something to say. I'm sorry you missed it.
No, first of all, I like those indicators. I think there is relevance in there. But one thing we need to discuss is how do we look at water? First of all, is there water waste? Or or is it not that...
A weight assigned to these?
Waste.
Yeah, just in one of them.
Or is it not that we should look at it from a more scientific perspective by looking at, or including also ET and issues around agricultural water management? To what extent is this impacting the groundwater and
I think there's an indicator of leakage that measures losses.
Yeah, but is leakage necessarily bad, or does it not recharge the groundwater?
Excuse me?
Leakage, say if you have poor pipes, does it not, I mean, what's the problem? I mean, it does recharge the groundwater.
The problem with that approach, if you look at it in the big picture, it's still within the hydrologic cycle, but you have spent money on pumping that water, on treating it, and then putting it through the pipe, and it's like you're leaking money out. So that's the reason we're looking at it. And you intend to give water to a certain consumer or end user, and you end up not giving them that water, even though they're paying for it. So this is the sense that we're looking at.
So if you want to start by assessing the different dimensions, if this is one of our first, our second, maybe our first objective. So we've presented to you the 5 dimensions and we've given you explanations. So do you think that for Lebanon, for the case of and for all of Lebanon, do you think that these dimensions capture the different challenges that the water sector is facing, and do they capture the different aspects of water security?
What do you mean by ease of understanding?
Ease of understanding, because basically these indicators are going to be given to some of them to stakeholders. So ease of understanding of these indicators by stakeholders, given that they...
Sorry?
By the
yes.
What the end use of this would be a set of indicators, or a set of dimensions with indicators that decision makers or managers of the establishment or higher up can look at it and look at the values and say, okay, if I have this population growth, and if I have this temperature change, and if I have this variability in rainfall, whatever set of indicators, and then they can come up with a number and say, oops, we are not doing so well overall. And then they can look at the dimensions and say, for example, in the environmental dimension, we are doing great, but domestically we are not, or as infrastructure we're doing well, but there is great risk. So this is how we intend for these to be done.
I think the ease of understanding actually should be directed to the establishment themselves. First of all, you have to choose the indicators and then to ask the establishment if they are understanding that or understand that or not, and the easy accessibility of the indicator itself. So we can't just suggest or say maybe, but 100% will be related to them.
Yeah, of course, but this is where we need your opinion, basically. Okay. Do you think this is an acceptable dimension with an ease of access to data for these indicators?
Well, the data,
or is it understandable?
The data is with the Bekaa Water Establishment, with the Litani Authority, with the USAID, who did extensive studies on the Litani River Basin. The Bekaa Water Authority already has a master plan for the whole authority, identifying all the water infrastructure, Yasmina, you know that, and they have a detail for every village, what is the storage. I mean, all of this data has been collected before.
I think they are going to compare what we are suggesting right now with all the management data right now by UNESCO.
No, you see, we have...
We're not suggesting. We
do have these available to us. We will be falling back on these for information. But knowing what you know, you can say, I know of a study by a Chinese firm that, okay, but if you don't tell us USAID funded a study, we tell yes, we check it, we know about it. But if there is something else that you might think of or whatever, we want to solicit input from it. It's just an open, if you want to think of it as brainstorming so that we can narrow our to see if we're embarking, if
our first step is in the right direction or if it is going to be a misstep. We want to make sure that we start
It's
in the
not
right
just that,
direction.
it's basically you covered everything. You know, there's not a single item that you're not covering. The question is, are you going to come up with a quantitative assessment of these indicators? And for example, would you be able to give a score or to give a number, or maybe 2 years in advance, would the Litani Authority or the Bekaa Water Establishment be able to assess the pressure on freshwater species, give it a number, and see if they're doing good on that or not?
We'll be stating it.
I know, but I mean, are these indicators measurable?
This is part of what we would want from you. For example, this for you might not be something that is easily accessible or easily understood, but then if we look at population growth, for example, normal population growth, we can somehow estimate that, okay, in 10 years, we anticipate the population to be this much. Or if we look at the different scenarios for climate change, we anticipate the temperature to be so, and the precipitation patterns to be so, and etc. Or we can look at the different deforestation or reforestation efforts that come in. So this is where you can say, okay, pressure on freshwater species.
Just an example.
No, I know. I'm following up on your example because you touched on something that is very relevant. For this, it might be not so relevant, and you can give it a low score. So maybe we can put it once the establishment has its own gauges that they can work on, that they monitor water, they monitor dissolved oxygen, they are able to get this data up, and they monitor freshwater species on a regular basis, and then they can do it. If not, put it aside, don't worry about it now, let's work on something else.
We have these forms on
yes.
If you put them, just to make it more practical, if you put them on the screen, and then for each page I will describe what each item is, and we proceed accordingly.
This will take a lot of time.
Okay, but this way we are very theoretical. Each one.
Yes, of course.
Let's try to be more practical.
So if we can just start by the different dimensions that we have chosen. So if we can go through each person and they can give us just not a ranking, but if all of these fall under, if all of these measure or capture the aspects of water security, and also looking at the Bekaa, which of these dimensions would be given maybe a higher importance? So if we can start by them. You can start by you.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat because I was not
Okay. So if you can, for each of these dimensions, if you can look at the specific case of the Bekaa, and then if you can give them a sort of ranking, just to see, given the local conditions of the Bekaa, which dimension would have a higher priority?
Okay, I think governance has a quite a high priority.
Okay.
And I think the economic aspect as well, because it's linked to governance and to infrastructure. Well, economics is pretty much the basic problem or the essence of the problem in the economic aspects and governance. Because once you have the money and you have the proper people in the right places, then I think the rest of the things can follow on.
Yes, so, sorry, I still have a question. Yes, I mean, this is about water security.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't understand, for instance, number 4, risk. This is a kind of water security, it's another water security, water risk is a kind of security, it's overlapping, I don't know.
One of the definitions of water security is being able to mitigate risks to floods, droughts,
waterborne diseases?
For example, because if you have a flood that's going to impact your infrastructure, then you're going to have your service, the quantity of water that's going to be available to the citizen is going to be affected. So that's one of the factors when we talk about water security. So
I think, can I just talk for everyone? I think what's missing is what is the goal? Like after we do this, what are you guys planning to do? Like what are you planning? What is the long-term plan? What are you planning to do?
We want to generate, to be able to generate over periods of time different scores for the sum total of them, for the sum total of the dimensions. For example, each dimension has an indicator, and this indicator has a score, a rank score or whatever. So this score, once we have that, is that we sum them up for the different dimensions, and then there is a score that we will assign it now for the baseline conditions. We consider now as the baseline condition. And then as time progresses, each dimension will change its score depending on the indicator's rank. So with time, things might change, and are they improving or they are going down in terms of security? So this is the ultimate use. What we can do is once we finish with prioritization, if you will, or the ranking of this, maybe spend 15-20 minutes alone, each alone, going through some of these dimensions and scoring them on our own. We don't need to walk every one because it'll take forever probably. So we can score whatever we want to score and then sit back and discuss it a little bit and then move on.
Yeah. So basically, you're gonna baseline.
Yes.
But this baseline, to get the baseline, don't you need to measure stuff?
We will use existing data. We will use currently available data. That's why we're asking, see if you have other data sources or if you have data sources that we should access.
Okay, I would put as high priority governance and also infrastructure, which is a kind of a result of economic security.
Yeah, I think economics is high priority. They're working at the deficit, the power establishment, just like all the others, except for So obviously, non-revenue water and the economic side of it has to be prioritized. Also, governance, that will lead to economics. Yeah.
Excuse me, actually, here, Dr. Nadim, I would like to say that it's really all the indicators are important. But let's say once you mention the water monitoring efforts, what do you mean by that? It is quantity or quality? Water monitoring first. And you put it under the governance dimension. Yes? So, because of that, I would like to say that the governance will play the first important indicator. Of course, not only for that, for the others. But let me ask you, and similar, the water infrastructure security. Once you said here the leakage within different components and so on. So here is the most important indicator, I mean, in terms of quantity, water quantity, and to save. Instead of building a new dam, first let's stop the leakage. So it is the first priority too. So you put us under a very
it is not easy.
Yes.
There are several iterations that we go by. That's why we want as much guidance and direction as possible.
So among those indicators you mentioned, I prefer to start with governance and infrastructure.
Personally, I would start by the water infrastructure security because it's the beginning of anything to do.
Engineering point of view.
I can't read. Yeah, I can see that. Well, I think we should definitely take a box at infrastructure, because it is important, and I can only reiterate what was said. Definitely also at environmental water use, environmental water flows, and specifically to understand the water accounts. And I think I would count this as environmental, or does anyone disagree? Water accounting, making the accounts, understanding how much is actually available, both ground and surface water, and ideally also rainfall. Exactly. Well, exactly. But where would it fall under? Environmental or? I think so. Yeah. So let's understand and let's look at environmental flows. I think it's key. And in terms of risk, I mean, we know it's not easy. So, and the final one is, well, government, obviously, yeah. I think, yeah, government is also the final one I'd like to tick. Yeah. So governance, basically, government structure. Anyone else? Or governance, governance, yeah. Huh?
Speak now. Based on our experience trying to implement a couple of projects, I would give the priority to governance, which the Bekaa water establishment or the North water establishment have problems with it. Once you have the governance in hand, economics will follow, infrastructure will follow, and domestic risk, then environment. So if you want to go for priority of the first three, maybe, we go for governance, economic, and infrastructure.
Okay. No, I think risk is very important. Because if we have a drought, even if you have good governance, good infrastructure, it's going to affect everything. And agriculture is in the economic part, right? So this is also very important because 80% of the water used in the Bekaa goes for agriculture. And you cannot separate the agriculture from the domestic because both are tapping into the same resources. For example, springs are used for domestic use by the Bekaa Water Authority, and they're also used by the farmers for irrigation. And I can send you a recent study about Orontes and Litani that we did, including all the updated water balance with the Syrian refugees. It's published. For governance, I direct you to a report on groundwater governance in Bekaa by the International Water Management Institute. Helena Nassif, I think, did that report, and it's Maria Helena Nassif, so you guys are aware of that. The infrastructure, you have a complete list of infrastructure with the Bekaa Water Establishment by the, again, USAID funded master plan. So I don't know why USAID is doing this over and over again. I don't understand that. Yeah. They're active on the same area, yeah. Okay.
Sorry, keeping in mind that what we're discussing right now, we want to see if it applies to all the regional authorities as well as the Bekaa.
Yeah, it could be a pilot, yeah. But we're starting with the Bekaa, you know, I mean, biggest user of water in Lebanon, to be honest, yani. So, for the environment, you know, I would rank it last, surprisingly to everybody, because the infrastructure comes before it. And if you have the wastewater treatment in the infrastructure, that's extremely important. So, because once you fix that, then the environment becomes, you know, a byproduct of that. And I'd just like to make a small comment here with all the recent advances of wastewater networks in Bekaa and funding by different NGOs, and they did an extra, you know, a favor for all the people by creating networks for those villages just to dump their sewage in the Litani River. And if you go, I go to Arik or to Bekaa every Wednesday, and I cross and I smell the sewage on the Litani, And not any single, except one in I'at, which is operating below capacity, not any single wastewater treatment in Biqa' is functioning properly. So, yes, very small, you know, very small, on very small scale. So, so that will fix the economic. For the domestic, I can say that, you know, the ministry, not I, the Ministry of Energy and Water, have mentioned that they have asked the Biqa' Water Authority to install meters on their pumping stations and networks, but they said that they refused. The Biqa' Water Authority refused to put meters. That's what they, I'm saying that, that's what I'm just saying what they, so unless you fix the governance of water in all Lebanon, not in the Biqa' Water Authority, or you suggest a new governance structure for water management in Lebanon, and I direct you to a report or a big study by Sharb al-Nahas on water governance in Lebanon and wastewater governance, done for the CDR in 2004 or 5, something around that. Very detailed study about the governance, and it's really helpful for you guys. And for the agricultural water use, we are currently estimating, actually we just finished estimating the agricultural water use on a spatial scale in Biqa', evapotranspiration mapping, using energy balance techniques with remote sensing. So I can provide input to that, you know, as a figure. Evapotranspiration mapping for all Biqa'. From everything. So all the water loss that goes into the system. So this brings back to the question that, you know, domestic use, you mentioned somewhere, one of the presentations, that domestic consumption. Domestic is not consumption, it's a diversion. So you divert to domestic, and then you recover it in the system as sewage. If you treat it, you can pump it back. And 90% could be, like, for example, in Japan, they pump back 90% of the domestic use. So if you want to look at the water balance, you have to treat the different uses, domestic, industrial, agricultural, or different diversions differently. Because only the agriculture goes as loss into the atmosphere. The other could be recovered in the system. And there is one gap, the industrial water use. We don't have records on the industrial water use in Lebanon. We just have estimates. All the estimates say that it's 30% of domestic. Every report you read, Biqa' Water Authority, Ministry of Energy and Water, USAID, every single report, 30% of domestic. That's it. We don't know what that is.
Why is it a challenge to estimate?
It's not a challenge. It's because it's not measured.
Nothing is measured. It's not
Because you don't have meters.
Why is it industrial water use that's not measured while other kinds of uses are measured?
They are not measured. They are estimated. So, for example, domestic use, you estimate in the... Yeah. No, I'm just answering. So domestic water use in the Biqa' estimated by the authority is 127.
Are there any Americans here at the table?
Americans?
Yes, there are.
Right.
So
the question is, look, we don't have the data regardless where we go. It's even a problem in the United States. Last year there was a great article in the New York Times about lacking water data. And if something what Hadi just proposed could be done in Lebanon, I think this should be a progressive and important project, because it would really, looking at the accounts and at different water use, and what we can do in the future. I think that's a very interesting.
And it's easy to do.
Huh?
It's industrial accounting.
But I don't think it's so easy. That's the other thing. We don't have data. That's a problem, because nobody has funded it, by the way. Should I get those?
Maybe it's one of recommendations.
Because the use of industry, it comes from the authority, the Biqa' Water Authority. It also comes from groundwater. So if you look at Kassarat, مثلا, that's a whole maze by itself.
Most of them are from groundwater. The water with the Biqa' water establishment is not able to give them that.
And even if you go, for example, to Limonde and you ask them how much water they're using, they will not tell you.
The farmers don't know how much they're using.
They don't know, but those they know, but they won't tell you. So that, I mean, that's that's a challenge. Anyway, this is what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
For me, infrastructure is the most important. Then environment, because it measures groundwater storage, which is a very important indicator for water security. And then lastly, maybe governments. And thank you.
We are at a stage in Lebanon where governance is, in my opinion, is the most important aspect. If we had good governance, then we would have improved our networks, improved our environment, improved our hygienic conditions, improved our water resources and risks. So governance, at the time being, is quite important. Economics comes next in terms of we are getting loans and grants. We're getting loans to construct all our infrastructure, and we're unable to pay them so far. I mean, the water authority, water establishment is being subsidized by the government rather than by its own fee collection. So in that sense, economics comes next. Risk is part of the in our conditions is part of the governance as well. I mean, if we have good governance, we'll reduce the risk. And I'm not talking about the natural risks. I'm talking about the water management risk, basically.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
It's under governance.
Can we take maybe 15, 20 minutes if you want a little bit more to maybe score or comment on the indicators? This way we're locking the doors so nobody can escape, but we'll open in half an hour.